Hello, and welcome to the Science on the 7th live stream, a virtual space where we talk about air quality and health. I'm your host, Pallavi Pant. Some of you may have heard in recent times the idea that we need the air quality data to be open and accessible to all. And why not? When we experience these air quality episodes in different parts of the world, wouldn't this information be helpful for us as we make decisions? Wouldn't it be helpful for policymakers to make decisions about what kinds of interventions we should have to bring down the levels of air pollution or to improve the levels of air quality? So, today I'm very excited to welcome an exceptional thinker who's done some trailblazing work on opening up the air quality data, and in doing so, highlighting where the biggest inequalities in air pollution are, where we see gaps in access to air quality data, availability of air quality data. Then also, she has been working to plug those gaps where possible. I would like to welcome Dr. Christa Hasenkopf, who's a close friend of mine, so I'm very excited to have her here. But professionally, she is the director of the Clean Air programs at EPIC at the University of Chicago, and she was one of the founders of OpenAQ. Welcome, Christa. Really excited to have you here with us today.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, Plavi.
Amazing. So, for those of you who are listening in as we talk with Krista, if you have questions that you would like answers to, please place them in the chat and we'll try to get to them towards the end of the conversation. But, Krista, I think my first question to you is, we hear a lot about open data in all kinds of contexts in our world today, including open data for air quality. And I think we have a graphic that sort of shows the various ways in which people have talked about air quality data. So if we can pull that up, we've seen requests for government data to become open so people can use it. We've seen requests for data in general to be more available and accessible. But why is that? Why do we want the air quality data to be accessible and open, and how can it help us?
Great question. I think the flow of information between people is everything for creating momentum for action around anything. Information is essential infrastructure. One statement I do hear a bunch is open data is not enough. Just having it exist isn't enough to make action happen. And I totally agree. This is true in air quality or really any field. But embedded in that statement, open data is not enough, is another truism. You almost always need a base layer of information that people can access to make it possible to achieve change. I think of data like any other infrastructure. Like if you need to go to the hospital, it is not enough that roads exist. You still need a vehicle of some sort to actually get you to the hospital. But look, if you're in a city or a country that doesn't have roads, the zeroth order problem you need to solve is about roads before you worry about optimizing for, say, vehicle type or specific routes. Data, air quality data are like roads. You need to solve that zeroth order problem so you can build the solutions on top of them. And in terms of air quality data, there are a waterfall of potential use cases from science to policy to activism to education. And really, it's all about creating key data infrastructure upon which clean air solutions can be built. And research bears that out, actually. Whatever the specific scenario in a given place, on average, when air pollution data is produced and openly shared where there previously was very little data, over the course of about 5 or 6 years, you start seeing significant decreases, truly health improving decreases in air pollution. And I'm specifically referring to a study done by some environmental economists in Australia and China that looked at the effect of a single PM 2.5 monitor that shared data in a fully open manner in non-OECD countries where there was previously little data. This study was by Jha and Lanauza and PNAS from 2022. And one last point I'll make on open data. In general, over the past 8 to 10 years or so, we've seen a growing number of governments share their data more openly. You referred to this as well. And there's been real progress there. Meanwhile, we're starting to see the opposite trend in what sensor companies are allowing their customers to do. So, for example, it appears a growing number of companies are making it harder for customers who pay to measure data to share that data. So a number of air quality sensor companies don't actually give their customers, again, the ones paying to measure their data, the legal right to even own their data. That's deeply problematic to the whole air quality action ecosystem from my perspective. I'm hopeful the larger community will find that unacceptable to our general mission and will push back against these changes. We're paying customers after all, so collectively we do have the power to shape what the market is offering us. It's just a matter of whether we use that power.
Yeah, I mean, I love your, analogy with sort of roads and hospitals. And I agree. I think in the last decade, especially, we've seen multiple locations that have had really small, ways in which people have started making data accessible or available just so everyone else can be aware of what the scale of their quality problem is. And in many instances, that has changed the tenor of the conversation. In bigger examples like China, we've obviously seen actual government action, mobilization of resources, and sort of results from that, with cleaner air in certain parts of China being seen already. And I'm actually very excited to talk to you today, also because you recently launched a new report that looks at this very problem. How do we build that first layer of data, and where do we build it? And what I particularly liked is the framing for this report. Often we hear we need more data, we need more monitors, and we need them ASAP. Like they should have been there yesterday. Why aren't they there? And what you say in this report is that there are certain places, some countries, some regions around the world where even putting in, 50,000 US dollars or 100,000 US dollars will essentially help bring very meaningful change. For those of you listening in, there's some quotes in there about experiences that people and experts have had in their countries. So do check out the report. It has lots of really good nuggets of, data and other types of information. But can you tell us, having done this report, having spoken with these 70 plus people from around the world, what are the key messages that the report is giving to us as a air quality community and to the broader community in general?
Sure. To go back to that analogy of roads being a zeroth order need for people to access things like hospitals, air quality data is a zeroth order need in order to pursue most clean air actions, as I think we both have pointed out. So the idea of this report was to look across the world and figure out where was this zeroth order need, air quality data, missing. So, for example, we were interested in finding places where there was very little or practically no on-the-ground air quality data being produced and shared by a government. We were also interested in places where there had been a historical lack in investment in the issue, yet where there were individuals or groups that are ready to go on monitoring air pollution. To us, those are the places where there's just this outsized opportunity for impact. No data to any data is the biggest jump you can make. On the other hand, we were less interested in countries that already had a ton of monitoring but still faced air pollution issues. And that's not because those countries aren't important, they're incredibly so. But these countries were missing some other key piece to the pollution puzzle. Data wasn't the block anymore, something else is. So to figure this out, we developed a rough metric called an opportunity score for countries to try and capture where could a small monetary investment in air quality data infrastructure have the highest probability of impacting a national level change, very broadly defined. And it's not surprising for those of us that work in the space that we found most of the countries with the highest opportunity were in Africa, and a smaller number in Asia and South America. DRC and Cameroon topped the list. Many of the countries we identified had annual PM 2.5 levels that were many times more than the WHO annual guideline recommendation. They also did not have a single PM 2.5 monitor sharing data openly from their governments. And as far as we could tell, in many instances, they had also zero in development assistance dollars for air pollution. We also built a registry of local actors who are either already monitoring PM 2.5 or really well poised to do so. And then we did deep dive interviews with a subset of them to understand what they needed to be successful, both in terms of monetarily and also more holistically from what they would need from a funder. Combining all of that information, we found that for a sum of $4 to $8 million a year, one could make a real dent in global air quality data infrastructure and close a lot of these major countrywide data gaps that persist in 70 plus countries. And if even just one of those countries, say even a country with a small population, was able to see even a relatively small reduction in their air pollution, the avoided cost of health damages for that one country would outweigh the cost of the entire global program. Meanwhile, given the research already out there, some of which I already mentioned, I think it'd be far more likely that more than just one country would see national level impacts if they were able to close these air quality data gaps. And our biggest conclusion was that supporting a global fund to do this work is a philanthropic no-brainer. I can't think of any other issue where it's within the realm of reason to think that $4 to $8 million a year will put a real dent in a global health issue, but this really could.
That's, yeah, that is sort of a really staggering number. And also, when we start to think about the way that air pollution impacts people's health and impacts the economy, I think that is the framing perhaps that we should be using more often, of where we will see gains, and those gains far outweighing any of the results that, or like the investments that we put into place. You mentioned the registry, which I think has been a great resource for many of us in the community, besides your report, of course. So if anyone's listening in, and if you are interested in also being a part of this sort of work, if you're doing air quality monitoring, please sign up for the registry. I assume, Christa, people can still add their initiatives and their organizations to the list.
Absolutely. We would love that. And what we do, and it's hopefully clear when you sign up, you also get signed up to our monthly newsletter where we push out resources and opportunities. So we would love folks to sign up.
Amazing. And I think also the newsletter is a place where you're highlighting some of these groups that are doing the work in different places and how they're approaching it. So it's a great place to also get featured. So do access the registry, sign up for it, and hopefully you can also bring some attention to the work you're doing. I think, going one step back, there's often been this larger conversation about inequalities in exposure. And you mentioned the biggest opportunities are in the African continent, maybe some opportunities in some Asian countries and in Latin America. And Asia and Africa have been these two places that have huge exposure levels, huge populations. So many people getting exposed to these high levels of pollution. And as a result, really big health impacts. These are also countries that are growing and expanding and developing, so it has big impacts on their economy. I'm wondering if, based on the data that you looked at and the people you spoke with, were there any findings that surprised you? I'm sure there were things that you said, well, of course this makes sense, but were there things that took you by surprise, or were things that you weren't expecting to see, or that were new in some way?
Yeah, I think probably two different points. And on a practical level, and to take a step back, the big idea behind this report was that we wanted to understand how we at EPIC could craft a fund to support local actors to close data gaps. And to figure out how to do that well, we wanted to do this report and interview a lot of people on the ground. And I've frankly been surprised that we've been able to make progress faster on that than I originally anticipated because of some of the results from the report. And I think that's been because it required a smaller amount of money to get started than we anticipated. I mentioned we interviewed a subset of the local actors who signed up on our registry, and we had pretty in-depth conversations about what it would take for them to measure PM 2.5 over a long period of time, and to do it alongside activities that they thought could make a national level impact. Now, I said this earlier, but now national level impact could mean any variety of things. It could mean getting the issue covered in the media, spurring policy action, or discussion about implementing or ratcheting up ambition of air quality standards at a more governmental level. But whatever way, shape, or form these local actors envision in bringing about these impacts and measuring PM 2.5 in some long-term way, they came up with a pretty consistent answer for how much they would need. Ballpark, as you mentioned, Pallavi, on average, 50 to 100K USD per year. I said this about the global number, but it is absolutely stunning to me that that amount could realistically have a decent shot at making a national level difference anywhere. And the other thing that I know surprised some folks was that we found so far to date about 100 local actors in self-identified data gap places who are already doing this work, or who are well poised to do it and are excited to do it. And one of the things I have heard for several years is that in so-called air quality data gap places, there just isn't capacity or interest to close these gaps. My personal intuition in engaging with a wide variety of folks working on these issues over my career has been that that isn't the case. It's not that those folks don't exist, but rather that the international community and especially funders are not connected to them. And even if they were, there aren't a lot of air quality funding pots, especially of that size, small enough that's available in the air quality world. And frankly, for a lot of systemic reasons that stink, they're also not the ones who have been getting the larger grants to do this work by and large. So maybe they get a piece of it as a contractor, but they're not the ones in charge of the scientific and policy directions of the work, which matters if you're looking to achieve impact in the countries they live and work in. Our hope is that this report has helped shine a light on the fact that there are indeed folks nearly anywhere pollution is ready, capable, and willing to do the work to close these data gaps, and that they're the best people to do this work. And we hope to find more such people because we know they're out there.
Yeah, I think I would totally agree with your point about there always, I mean, there are people that are trying to address this problem at many different scales, but often when we start to look at the global level, it may not be as easy to find these people. So I think this is a great exercise to find those people, and also now opportunities to engage them more actively and hopefully build up the capacities that they've already been trying to set up. And I recently at a meeting I did this very interesting exercise which I'm now trying out in every setting, which was called Tomorrow Party, and it had like several steps, but I've really taken a simplified version of it, which asks us to imagine the future. And I'm wondering if you would be willing to try that out with me for just a minute. So great. So let's say it's April of 2025. 1 year has passed since we spoke today, and I'm visiting you in Munich, which I really hope happens. And we're taking a walk. We are sort of reflecting on what's happened since we last spoke. There were all these amazing people doing good work. There were opportunities to scale it up, and you were working to make that a reality. So taking this walk in Munich with a cup of coffee in our hands, how are you feeling today on April 5th, 2025? And who are you working with? What kind of people have you supported or helped get data capacities on air quality built up? Walk us through that. What would that look like for you?
Oh, this is a fun exercise. I want to try this out on other people as well. So I mentioned we're working to build a fund to support local actors in closing data gaps in high opportunity countries. And after we published this report, we were very fortunate to receive follow-on funding that's helping us do that. And we're currently in the process of making awards to our first tranche of folks who will be selected from a subset of the local actors we interviewed for the report. And my hope is next year that we're working directly with dozens more local actors and finding ways to support them in their work, both through funding, but also other types of resources. And a year from now, I would want to feel like I've got a team of local actors to cheerlead for, to rally behind, to just be energized by. That role is honestly like my sweet spot in life and what I find joy in. And my general hope is to feel happy by what I've been able to push forward with others, but also unsatisfied that we're not anywhere near the finish line yet. I know that will not happen in a year. Because I also find if you're never happy and only unsatisfied, that's kind of depressing way to go throughout life. And if you're only happy and not unsatisfied, you don't push for change and things don't get better. So a year from now, I hope I feel a good balance of both of those emotions too.
Amazing. I really hope that happens, because also by building up or filling up some of the data gaps in these places, we can start to get a better handle on the progress that we are making. Because a lot of times when we hear or talk about air pollution, we tend to couch it in these big numbers and big terms. So many people die as a result of air pollution, like nothing is happening. But I feel like, personally speaking, having worked in this space for a while now, I do see progress. Maybe, like you say, it's not at the scale that we would have liked for it to be, but no progress is quick and no progress is easy. It just takes time and effort. And in sort of getting ready for our conversation today, I was also reflecting on a lot of the work that you have done over the last decade and longer. You've sort of taken on different roles at different stages, worked with many different people, governments, nonprofits and scientists and people in the tech space when you founded OpenAQ and sort of led that effort for several years. I'm curious to hear from you. What is that one achievement, that one like success story that you hold on to, that keeps you going and that gives you hope that we will get to that sort of clean air for all that we've been collectively working towards?
Mm. I don't think I can point to one specific achievement or success by a particular individual. There really are too many, but I won't dodge your question. And I will say that I am especially energized by a particular type of success. I love seeing folks, they could be operating at any scale, who fully recognize and use the power they have at their disposal to change the way things work. I think most of us, most of the time, do not do this. We go along with the status quo, even if we don't like it. We might complain about it, post angry things on social media, but we don't actually take ownership of the problem and use our full weight to push on the problem. I think a big part of why we don't do that is because we believe it's futile. Who are we to make a change? We are too small to make a change. We're going to look stupid if we try and nothing actually happens. And look, to be clear, I do think there's an unfair distribution of privilege that legitimately does give some folks more power than others. But I also truly believe we have a lot more ability to shape our reality than we often put out there to the world. So, for example, I have loved meeting folks who run a data agency in Cote d'Ivoire who do nothing in their regular work with air pollution, but decided it's unacceptable that there isn't any air quality data in Abidjan. So they put up their own sensors and start making a fuss. Or a couple of medical doctors who are shocked at the impacts of air pollution and the effects it's having on health in their home country of the Gambia and decide to engage the highest levels of their government to do something about it. Or any individual who starts a philanthropy or new program or nonprofit to devote actual resources to a problem. Or someone like you, Pallavi, who bootstraps multiple programs that support scientists, especially women across South Asia working on air pollution. And maybe one last concrete, super recent example. I've been inspired by this guy and his team in Thailand who have started up a company called Air Gradient. They make air quality sensors like a lot of companies do, but they do something pretty radical. You just don't see this in business really. They make their entire device, hardware, software, data, fully open. So if you have an improvement to make or notice a bug, you can write the code to make it better and share it. And as I learned with running OpenAQ, this will improve a project much, much faster than if it's closed off. And you can actually build a lot more trust and community in that kind of operation. Meanwhile, what's actually wild though is that they have blueprints of their sensor, their algorithms inside of it, and it's within the legal rights of their license that anyone, anywhere can copy this precisely what they do and then go sell it even. Meanwhile, they promote making the data fully open and they give you full ownership of the data. It's sort of something I've taken for granted that, of course, a business can't do. Like it's not reasonable for them to do. That's not great in general, but that's just the reality and real constraints of the business world. But this group has decided that way of operating doesn't fly with what they think is most helpful to the air pollution ecosystem. So they decided it was within their power to do things completely differently. And they appear to be rocking it as far as I can tell. And you know what? They're also right. What they're doing in regards to their openness is better for the air pollution ecosystem. And they showed me that those rules I thought were written in stone were actually in pencil. And I swear I don't have any investment in their company. I'm absolutely energized by folks who realize they have the power to radically rewrite the rules to make things better for society. And I love seeing those kinds of people succeed.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent story, and I've followed some of their work, and like you, I'm just amazed with the way that they're running the business, and it sort of goes back to the roots of how low cost sensing really started, with people tinkering with these sensors in their homes and labs and other places, and trying to come up with something that would work. And the sensors over time have really revolutionized the way people are using and accessing air quality data. So that has been a huge step forward, in many spaces when it comes to air quality data. I think one final question that I have for you, and this is maybe more of a personal sort of reflection, but you worked in many different regions. You've worked with many different people. We talk broadly about equity and trying to make things better for those that haven't had that chance. In the air quality space, how do you see this conversation developing or going forward? I think we've started to have a lot of attention on this issue, and your work, for instance, this report focused on plugging the gaps where the biggest needs are. I think starting to those types of narratives are starting to emerge. So where do you see us as a community going based on what you've seen and experienced in the last while, I would say, that you've been working on air quality issues now?
I think we have some choices, and I think the more that we're clear that we're making choices by the monitors we purchase, by the code we share with one another or not, by the choices of governments that share information. I think we're coming to this crossroads where we are getting more attention on the issue. We definitely need more all the time, but I do see that awareness rising at a global level. And I think with that can come opportunities. I think there's an opportunity to better wrangle the global view and progress and accountability of air pollution data. I think to date, it's been difficult to get sort of a standard agreed upon level of what the pollution is in country A versus B, or in year X versus Y. And it's actually a fairly, I will say, simple technical problem in one sense. And it's a matter, I think, of us socially and politically agreeing upon the value of that sort of thing. So I think we're coming to a place where that could be a reality. And I think there'd be a lot of value, not just in the numbers and the accounting we could have, but also in the infrastructure and capacity that's involved in coming up with those numbers from one country to another, and in the level of engagement we could spur, greater engagement we could spur on the issue. So that's something I'm super, super hopeful about. But I think it'll be those sorts of paths we take will be a choice the community makes with whether we'll go down that path or we'll stay more segmented, which we've been to date. But although we've been getting more and more connected over the years, we're still not quite there.
I think that's a great message. And indeed, I think we have some choices to make with the way that some of the recent developments have worked. For instance, at the UN Environment Assembly, there was a resolution on air quality that did talk about greater cooperation among countries. Great step forward. I think there's a lot that all the countries can learn from each other's experiences, however big or small. And hopefully we will continue on this path of making the choices that will give us the biggest benefit over time. And I think for all of us, the main rationale for this work on air pollution is so that people can breathe cleaner air and can live healthier lives, which is probably a sentiment that everybody would agree on. Like, I doubt that any of us would disagree on that. So thank you for all of the amazing work that you've done over the many years, and hopefully the work that you're continuing to do in the next few years. I think what I'm taking away from this conversation is two things. One is that no change is too small, which I think is a really useful lesson for us to keep in mind. Those are the things that keep me going sometimes, because our work, of course, takes long times, but we can celebrate even the smallest wins. And then I really liked your point about creative solution making. Like, it doesn't, just because it's been this way for however long we've known, it doesn't have to be this way. We can create new pathways forward. You gave us some examples on that, which is amazing. So thank you very, very much for your time and for all of your energy and enthusiasm that you bring to the space. I look forward to what you do in the coming months and years. And I hope that I do catch up with you in person soon enough in Munich or elsewhere.
That would be great. Thanks so much, Pallavi.
Thank you. And everyone listening in, thanks a lot. Please come back and join us on Tuesday, May 7th, when we will be back with another episode, and we'll talk with Dr. Matt Tejada from NRDC, based here in the US. We will continue some conversations on air quality, inequalities, and inequities. And if you have ideas on guests or topics that we should be thinking about, please get in touch. Until then, take care. Goodbye.